So my family and I have been on this financial independence journey for right at 4 years now, going into our fifth year. And today I want to talk about some of the keys that we've implemented to help us along this journey. The sort of overarching key takeaway really is going to be pretty simple, in theory anyway, and that is to spend less than you make and to invest the rest. Sounds super simple. But today I kind of want to talk about how we managed it. And I want to kind of preface something too, because I know a lot of times it depends on how much financial independence stuff you watch. But one of the common themes is that a lot of them are very high earners, right? They're engineers or they work in cybersecurity or something like that. So they make a pretty good salary, which obviously makes this journey infinitely easier. My wife and I were not in that position when we started, and I would argue we're still not in that position. When we started 4 years ago, we were bringing home, well, not bringing home, but our income was probably what, about 110,000 combined, not each. My wife was making around 70 working for the government, and I was a teacher, so I was bringing home right around 40. So we were making a decent salary, but by no means were we crushing it. I guess it's all a matter of perspective, though. With that being said, we had to come up with a plan if early retirement was really going to be anywhere in the realm of possibilities for us. So we started off with key takeaway number one, which is creating an overall budget, seeing what we spend a month, and then using that budget as a guideline to see what could be cut. And going into it, we didn't want to nickel and dime everything and be completely miserable and then fall off the wagon, because that's what's going to happen, right? If you're completely depressed and stuff because you can't spend $5 on something. So we focused on the big ticket items, which for us and for most Americans is housing and your vehicle. Let's talk about housing first. So at the time, we were renting, and our rent wasn't terrible. We're in a relatively low cost living area, but still, that's money that's going out of our pocket every month that we would like to keep and invest. So we moved overseas. And I say that like it was super simple. It was not super simple. There's a whole process. My wife works for the government, so she had to go through the whole hiring process that way and get a job overseas. And I'm going to make another video about that later. But basically, we now live in Belgium. My wife's salary got bumped a little bit from being over here, but the big advantage to coming overseas for the government is that they pay for your housing. So that's our number one biggest expense that is now wiped out. Number two, which was the cars. And thankfully for us, we never really made the mistake that a lot of people make by buying a super expensive car. I was always pretty good with money. I just didn't understand investing and all that. So we had one car that was my wife's college car. That was an old beater, Chevy Cavalier. And then we had my car, which at the time that we started was already paid off, but it was on its last leg. So I guess you could say we got lucky. Depends how you want to look at it. We did get rear-ended by somebody, and that totaled out the car. Which honestly, if that wouldn't have happened, I'd still be fixing that car every other day, which was kind of a hassle. But that was kind of a nice push to get rid of that car, get some money from the insurance, and buy something else that was more reliable, which is exactly what we did. I did a whole bunch of research. I bought another used car, but had less mileage, was good on reliability, good on gas, and good on safety. Those are three big areas that I looked at when buying a vehicle. But like I said, I bought it used. I applied the money I got from the insurance for the totaled out car to that car, and then I paid that one off within probably a year to 13 months. Just went ahead and knocked it out because it wasn't very expensive. So by the end of that first year in our fire journey, we had no housing and we had no car payment. Our two biggest expenses were now wiped out. So effectively, we now check that first box, which we talked about at the beginning of the video, which is spend less than you make. This now allowed us to focus on the investment portion of it. And if you're new to it, which I was, it's very confusing. Okay, so I did a lot of research in advance. I talked to a lot of people. I watched YouTube. I read books, all those things. And the plan that I came up with was that we are going to fill our retirement accounts right, that we have access to at age 59 and a half. And then we are going to fill the gap between when we plan on retiring, which in our case is 49.50 to age 60, right? Because you can't access those retirement accounts that early unless there's penalties involved. So basically we're planning for 2 retirements, if that makes sense. And so the way we started this was, you could call it buckets, you can call it whatever you want, was we started with my wife's 401k. We did the match. Okay, it's a 5% match. That's free money. So we allocated money there. After that was full, we focused on an HSA, which we had access to, because an HSA is triple tax advantaged. And we could talk about that at a later time. But basically, it comes out of your check without being taxed. It grows without being taxed. And then you can withdraw it without being taxed. It's the only account that does that. So it's kind of like a super IRA, basically. There are some stipulations on how you can take it out, but that's not what this video is about. But that was our second bucket. The third thing that we wanted to do was fill up our Roth IRA accounts for myself and for my wife. Once we finish all that, we still have money. We circle back to the 401k and we try to max that out. After all those are filled in that order, then we come to our bridge account. And this is the one that I mentioned is going to carry us from age 50 to 60. So we need to have money in there to carry us during those 10 years. So I guess what you can consider the downside to this plan is that so much of this money is going to retirement accounts that I have access to at age 60, that there's not really, depending on how much you make, not really that much left over for the bridge account. Because if you do the quick math, it's around $48,000 to fill up all those retirement accounts. Now, the good part of some of it is some of that contribution is from the match. And also with my wife's job for the HSA, they would do a contribution. So we can contribute $8,300 a year, but I want to say it's like $1,500 of that comes as part of the job as a contribution. So that's $1,500 that we don't contribute. So it's $8,300 minus the $1,500 to max that out. But like I said, that makes it tough to put a large chunk into the bridge because you're putting so much in the retirement accounts, which leads me to our next key, and that's increasing our income. And, like I mentioned before, I was a teacher. I was already coaching, so I was getting extra income from that, but my salary was not high. My salary is still not high. So we did side hustles. I made a whole other video. It's right here on some side hustles that we did that actually work. Okay. And that was a way to supplement our income. And outside of that, now that we're 4 years in, I have a job that pays me a little more, but I'm still not making anywhere near 6 figures, nowhere near that. But the benefits of my job, one of the benefits is that they pay for my degree. So I'm getting a master's degree, and the intent of that is to get me prepared and get me qualified for a higher paying job so that I can increase that amount of money that I put into my bridge account. So really our overarching goal here is really to have a bridge account that has enough money to comfortably cover us for 10 years from 50 to 60. And while we're using that money, the money that's in our retirement accounts, the 401k, the Roths, is in the background continuing to grow. So by the time we have access to it at age 60, it is big enough to carry us for the rest of our lives. So that's kind of our plan. Like I said, it's almost like doing 2 retirements, the one at 50 and then again at 60, but you're using different pots of money. The benefit that the retirement accounts have is they go untouched for a long time. And we really only have to grow it to a certain amount because it has the extra time to grow to age 60 with compound interest. I hope that's not confusing. But in a nutshell, that's our goal. 2 retirements, bridge account for age 50, and then all our retirement accounts that we'll start using at age 60. So yeah, that's basically our plan in a nutshell. I hope this was helpful or at least interesting, and I'll see you next week.